Again, good afternoon. It's great to be back in Morrison. I was surprised. I was walking up the stairs and I said, "Oh my goodness, it smells the same." Like, it's a very specific smell. I don't know, but yeah, we're glad to be here representing the class of 2006.
Some things have changed. So a lot of things have stayed the same. Congratulations on having Wi-Fi. Or they just had. They had just implemented high-speed internet when we got here, so that gives you an idea.
It was a really big deal
right.
When we had high-speed, as opposed to like dial-up the first year.
And things have changed. I don't see, as many cargo shorts as things change, but many things have stayed the same. For instance, we were on the website the other day, and the application essay is still the same. It's compare. Well, no, it's good because it's compare yourself to a fictional character. And it works for, I think, a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good idea. I mean, for one thing, it presupposes that you've at least read a book, which is good. And it allows your admission folks to kind of sort the applications really easily, No offense to anyone, but if you compare yourself to Bella from Twilight, they might put you at the bottom of the stack for a while. Things like that. But more importantly, it tests if you can apply like your education to your life and vice versa. Because we believe that education is not just knowledge, it's not just checking things off and learning things or answers on a test, but it's a process where you become a better person and become to know yourself and others so that you can serve others. So that's why Chris and I, in different ways, work in the field of education because we really think that the things worth knowing in life aren't easy. They don't have easy answers.
But not everybody believes that, though.
Yeah,
that's
true.
And working in the public school system and private school, the attitude all too often is the opposite of what Andee just said. When I first started teaching in Philadelphia, one experience that really sticks out is the job was described to me as basically teaching kids how to memorize answers for a benchmark test so that the school could reach a certain number and continue to exist, or at least continue to have the autonomy they wanted. And so rather than do that, I assigned a short story and was trying to motivate them to read it. And one kid got really upset and said, "You're not a teacher, you ain't teaching, this isn't teaching," because teaching had always been something that was done to him. That I was supposed to stand up there and tell him what to think, and he was supposed to give it back to me, and that's how it worked, and that's what he was comfortable with. And he got very angry and said, "Well, where'd you go to school? You know what you're doing." And so being sort of a haughty 23-year-old, it just started, said, "Well, for undergraduate or for my graduate degree?" And that just made him angry, and he's like, and he was like, "Well, you got a master's?" That's why he ain't teaching. He's got a master's. He's got that master's money. He's pulling down $100,000 a year. And I wasn't. I was very puzzled because I wasn't making anywhere near $100,000. And I looked at it. I came home and I was like, the retirement stuff they said didn't make sense. But I know I'm not
$100,000.
And what occurred to me later was that someone in another class had shown him a chart of average salaries for each degree, that if you have a high school diploma, you make X amount of money. And if you have a master's, you make this much. And if you have a doctorate, you make this much. And so he was under the impression that, that was it. You hit this level with this degree. And then I'm not making fun of him, but that's, I understand that he just, everybody showed him education as a benchmark, as you hit this and then you're good and you know a certain amount and that's worth something in the real world. And that really touched me, and I, kind of thank God that I had an experience that taught me something different, and most of that came from here.
Yeah, definitely. And we weren't always so deep about it, That's a mindset that we developed here at Scholars. So, for example, the application essays, like, Chris and I weren't dumb, like we gave the right answers. We knew what we were supposed to write in an essay like that.
And Twilight hadn't been written yet.
Twilight had not been written.
Obviously. But I remember I compared myself to Stephen Dedalus from James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man because I was torn between sacrificial spirituality and the Dionysian selfishness, and the only way that I could reconcile the two was through art revealing, it's transcendent but relatable beauty.
Yeah, I wrote about Grindel because I just read Grindel, and I don't know. But the bottom line is we didn't write about Bella. You know, at the time we saw education as judging what the people in charge wanted us to say. We could tell what they wanted and we could give it back. And that's human nature, and we were, you know, high-achieving kids, so that's what you are trained to do. But according to Dr. Stave, our professors may have been bragging about us all week. No? Yes? Maybe? And that's because, you know, we worked hard and we turned things in on time most of the time and got good grades, and we don't blame them for loving us so much. You know, those are the students that teachers are drawn to kind of naturally, and we both know that from being teachers.
But as much as that was the case, you know, I learned so much more, even though I would learn from a lecture from Dr. Jensen or you know, an analysis of a book from Dr. Means. I learned a lot more when I disagreed with them, and when, you know, I thought they were completely wrong about something, whether or not, you know, they knew better or not. They usually did. But when I disagreed and when I was forced to kind of form my own opinion about something, I learned that my point of view and observations mattered, and they cultivated that, and they made me feel that way. And that's the kind of environment that you're in. And taking that kind of personal responsibility allowed me to grow. It taught me that, you know, what I had to say mattered. And that's, if I really wanted to boil it down, that's probably the thing that I would credit the Scholars College with the most. Is that at other schools, it's dangerous to step out on your own and to develop an idea that's different from the one your professors had, and to kind of go out on your own. But here, that's the goal, and that's something that's really stuck with me.
Yeah, definitely. I have the cruel misfortune of being relatively well organized. So not too long ago, I came across some papers I had written my freshman year. And some of them were incredibly embarrassing, actually. But I've realized, like I could see myself getting better through these papers and thinking more deeply and being able to analyze and express myself better just through the 4 years that I was at Scholars, and since then, because I've continued to build those skills. And one of the cool things from when we were here is that it's not just learning from the professors who you're extra close to compared to other schools. It's also learning from the other scholars. Chris has a pretty good story about learning from other scholars.
When I first got here, my roommate was a senior, which at the time was, you know, probably as strange as it would be now that a freshman was.
I think he was the only senior still in the dorm.
So he had to go somewhere, right? But what that allowed me to do, I kind of had a mentor at the student level too, and my other friends at you know, my friends at other universities were just kind of going to class when they felt like it, and, you know, doing the work when they felt like it, and just kind of like groping through this dark room of what was really like 13th grade. Whereas I had this model to show me kind of what I would be capable of in a few years, and what was expected of me, and how to take personal responsibility for my own learning. And that's something that you really can't discount. That's a unique college experience, I think. And sometimes, you know, that kind of grew up a little fast because of that. There was a lot of pretending to be asleep in room 127 and pretending to be awake here. But I wouldn't really trade it anything, because I think like the positives that came from it, that community, which is really what we're talking about, is rare.
Yeah, I remember, you know, conversations from particular classes. I remember the moment in ecology where I started to like get it. And I was just like, oh, okay. And other like lessons, like I remember those things. I don't remember the day that I declared a major. I don't remember exactly what it says on the diploma. Like, it wasn't about getting a piece of paper and being done with education. Like, it was very much about, you know, building an outlook of learning, which like we still do every day. And
I don't think I ever would have finished if you
yeah
had, like, sat
yeah, at
down.
some point I had to be like, okay, there are credits that you have to have.
One of the only times that that Dr. Means was ever angry with me is when I wanted to take a class of yours and I couldn't because it wasn't a 4,000 level and I had to get out of here at some point. And you just looked at me like I was from another planet. Like, that's not, why would you care about that? That's not how you are. But it worked the other way too, because there was one day where I looked at my transcript and I was like, I think I have a French minor. I think I did that. I didn't really mean to, but it worked out.
Did, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, happens. Yeah. Kind of the same way I got an English minor. Just kind of happens. And one thing we wanted to definitely talk about is that, like, we know very few people who are in their, late 20s, early 30s who are doing what they thought they would be doing when they were 18, or what they thought they would be doing when they were 21, or when they graduated college. I am definitely not the world traveling photographer or whatever it was that I wanted to be.
I'm not a critically acclaimed author.
Not.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, he has a blog and I take photos. But that's not necessarily what we do every day, and that's okay because we approach what we do every day with that desire to learn and to be better. And what I do in my job right now, which is very business focused, is I look for ways to make things more efficient so that our school leaders and our teachers can focus on the very, very hard work of teaching that I learned from first-hand experience was very, very hard. And so it's always learning, it's research, it's reaching out to people and listening to what people need.
It's kind of hard to translate that mindset into the way most people look at college. That you hear all these scary statistics about how hard it is for even college graduates to get a job, but we're still sending this really harmful message, I think.
Yeah. People still send the message, and even at the charter schools that I work for, we try to get kids to understand, if you get to college, it gives you an opportunity you may not have, which is definitely true. But we want to make sure that you don't see college as, again, a benchmark, but that it's a place to learn and grow and find who you are. And I mean, we, not to brag, we did college right. I got A's, and Chris got all A's except for in
physics lab,
pre-cal, that kind of thing. But the way that I came to have the job that I have now, and the way that I will continue to change in my career, just was a series of little decisions over time, and forks in the road, and just staying flexible to opportunities and staying aware and open to opportunities.
And the other thing, still kind of thinking along those lines, when we were here, we heard a lot that it's not for everybody. And that was something that was just kind of in the air. It was part of the school, and not just this building, but NSU in general. It's not for everybody. You have to read a book a week. It's not for everybody. Or, those people are really smart, but they're also kind of weird. It's not for everybody. And things like that. And now that I'm a teacher and I have my own classroom, that's kind of the way that my students talk about my own teaching, which might be more student-centered than they're used to, or more challenging, or anything like that. Is I hear the same things, that it's not for everybody. I love it, but it's not for everybody. And I guess in true Scholars College persecution complex mode, if it's not for everybody, I think that's a shame, and that I wish it was, and that's kind of the education that we want to work toward. That's not our fault if it's not for everybody. It's everybody else's.
And kind of on a closing note, one thing we haven't talked about is that we are married. We've been together since freshman year. We met the first day. We didn't start dating until October or something our freshman year.
Very.
We waited. But so people ask, what was the best part of college, and we have to say the doting, oh, I met the love of my life.
And you kind of have to. Yeah, especially if she's there, I could be like, thesis party, senior year.
Junior year's thesis party was better. But the only reason that kind of I think we've been able to grow together as adults and help each other navigate this kind of confusing world of adulthood is because we've learned to know ourselves and to question what we encounter. And we didn't really know that before coming to Scholars College, and Scholars College really taught us that. So you're getting something very valuable here. That's what we wanted to say.
Thank you.
Talk a little bit about your experience in Argentina. Do you
Sure.
know English?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I went to Argentina through a program called Eye to Eye, and they do basically volunteer travel. So I was there for 2 months, and I was in like northwest Argentina. I was up kind of over here by the waterfalls. And that was a really interesting experience because it was my first real experience teaching on a regular basis. I had done the advanced program. I was a TA in a math class, but this was the first time I was really trying to communicate with young children and get them interested in learning something they didn't really need to know according to kind of how they thought, and also trying to get them to trust me because they knew I would only be there for a short amount of time. But it was a really good experience, and they were a lot of fun to work with. It was still stressful. I should have probably learned then that I wasn't cut out for teaching because it takes me way too long to lesson plan. I'm really, really bad at it. But again, it's part of my perfectionism and wanting to kind of have everything lined up, and teaching is much more of an art than a science, I think.
But you kind of built on that from your study abroad experience.
Right, I did study abroad my junior year also. I studied in Monterrey, Mexico, which was a slightly less violent place at the time. But I appreciated that scholars made that possible, and that I was able to have those experiences because they really did.
Where were you? I mean, I've actually done a little bit of research in Argentina. I'm quite fascinated with Argentina. But what town were you in?
I've forgotten the name of it. I'm so sorry.
Was it a big one?
Oh, it was Posada. It was so near the border with
Paraguay?
Paraguay, exactly.
You
Right over
never
there.
went. Did you ever go to Rosario? That was
Yes.
supposed to be a big anarchist center.
I don't
In
recall.
1900.
Right, I don't recall seeing too many anarchists, but I did actually go to Rosario. Yeah, and I traveled.
You're not supposed to see them. So.
Right.
What age did you teach?
There I taught. They were in 5th grade, I believe. So they were, 10, 11. Uh-huh.
Could you talk about the Teach for America experience? Because I have students that are interested in that from time to time.
Absolutely. So the Teach for America experience. I applied. I was a little overwhelmed my senior year with writing a thesis and all that stuff. So I waited until the year after I graduated to apply to Teach for America. And I tried to get some more experience. So that was part of the traveling. I wanted to get some teaching experience under my belt. And I think that worked. They accepted me. And it was a roller coaster ride. It's really, really hard. No doubt, because you go in, you have 5 weeks of teaching for 45 minutes a day and listening and learning and trying to figure out everything you're going to need to know to teach all day with a group of kids. I taught 4th grade bilingual, so I was lucky in that I had a very small class. It was only 16 to 20 kids, depending on the time of the year. But as compared to the other people at my school, were teaching classes of 30 or more. But it was very difficult because I had students who had very recently just come into the country, not speaking a word of English, versus people who had been born there, lived their whole life there, spoke Spanish kind of poorly. And so I had to teach that whole range of knowledge, and I was supposed to be doing it in English because by 4th grade they were supposed to be transitioning into a mostly English environment, and it was definitely difficult, but it was a really really good experience for me. Like I had a really rough time with it. Like you can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of returning to our idea of you just don't know and you never know what is going to happen in your life. I applied too, and I didn't get into Teach for America. I don't know to what degree this is still the case, but they were looking for a very specific type of person, very organized and structured, and that's not who I was, and I didn't lie, or didn't know enough to lie. But now I'm a teacher, and that experience showed Andee that's not for her, but I went the more traditional route and found without that's what I enjoy and that's what I want to do. So you never know. Maybe they missed out. Or maybe they made the right decision they wanted, and different things happen.
Right, and what I did learn for my 2 years teaching was just the reality of the education gap in our country, and like that definitely affected me, and I wanted to stay in education because I thought that I knew that I still had something to give to that world, and that if I could help other people who are more equipped to deal with the day-to-day teaching by doing the stuff that I'm more equipped to do, which is, spreadsheets. Who knew? You wouldn't have known in Scholars. I love them. But that's how I kind of found my way, and I wouldn't have been able to have those opportunities without going for the Teach for America route. But it's definitely not easy. Don't let anyone tell you that it's gonna work out great.
So you're in public education now.
Yes.
I mean, you're working for what, the state Board of Education?
No, sir. I work for First Line Schools, which is a charter management organization.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You said.
In New Orleans. So we First Line Schools started as the very first charter school in New Orleans in the 90s. It was New Orleans Charter Middle. And then right before Katrina, they gave us a charter to take over one of the lowest performing middle schools in the city, and then Katrina. And so in January of that year, the charter middle and this other school, St. J. Green, kind of joined together, and it became a K-8 school. And that was in 2005, 2006, and every year the student scores have gone up. It's actually kind of transformed the neighborhood, which is a really powerful thing. It's it's a 100-year-old building. It's falling apart, but they built this amazing garden in the back, and the kids, they have a teaching kitchen, and there's a soccer field that the Saints donated, and like the opportunities that these kids have now is just so much better. And then like now there's a street, I don't know if y'all know anything about New Orleans and the rising restaurant scene, but Ferret Street is right by this school, and like there are restaurants popping up, there are bars popping up. We had when I was there working as an operations manager at that school, we had a movie crew. The movie, it's coming out now, actually, Broken City, anyone? Was filmed in New Orleans, even though it's about New York, whatever. It was filmed in New Orleans, and they used our school as like a staging ground because they were shooting in a bar down the street.
What neighborhood are you in?
That's uptown,
Uptown.
right off of Napoleon and Claiborne.
Okay, gotcha.
But we have a school in Mid-City. My office is in Mid-City. There are schools. We have a brand new building in Gentilly that one of our schools has moved into. We just started a high school last year. And so far, like that, if you're interested in public education reform, like New Orleans is the place to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's like really, really powerful things are happening.
It sounds as though public education is in a huge state of transition in this country. I mean, because when I came to Louisiana, I felt as though most of the students I taught had no knowledge of the public schools. They had been to private schools, they'd been to Christian academies, they had been homeschooled, anything to avoid the public school.
Yeah, and Chris was grown up that way, and New Orleans still very much has that divide of Catholic schools versus public schools, but but there are more options now.
There are more, yeah, right.
There are many more options available.
I mean, the schools that you work for, they're willing to bus in anybody.
Yeah, you can
Doesn't
you can
matter.
live anywhere in the city. We will find you.
Open admissions.
Yeah, and there are, you know, pluses and minuses to that, all with anything, but
And you depend on the taxpayer to,
yeah, it's publicly funded. We get the same amount of money from the state and the feds that any other public school would. We do get, you know, private donations as well that we use because we basically spend about $1,000 more per student than we get from the federal
what is
government
the
or the
racial
state.
divide in the school?
Our schools are mostly, I think it's like 95% African American. Our school in Mid-City though has about 15% Hispanic population.
I was wondering about the Hispanic population.
Yeah, it's
That's
growing. It's growing in different parts of the city. Mid-City is a...
Since Katrina, really, isn't it? Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah, Mid-City is growing with distinct.
Chris, once you started teaching high school English, what were the hardest challenges? What were you not prepared for? The literature, I'm sure you were prepared.
I was, yeah. The age made a big difference, being young and there not being that much of a gap between how old I was and how old my students were was a huge adjustment, and kind of knowing the right balance of authority to strike. I feel as if now I sort of have a looser classroom than a lot of people I work with, and that the kids have a lot of freedom, but that's a difficult thing to negotiate, and especially early on. I had a lot of trouble knowing kind of where that line was, and you have to be very conscious of that and of just adjusting to that I'm the adult. But that has gone away, and now I think my challenges aren't that different from anyone else's. Motivating and challenging students in the right way, and not being satisfied with my own methods, and trying to evolve and trying to push myself. And I kind of am on a different side of the coin, like Andee said. I came from the Catholic school system, and I still work there within it, which works really well for me. And I guess the way that I look at it, though I do have some of the Teach for America guilt of there are people who could be better served in the community by me, my personal teaching style and my personal strengths kind of lend themselves to pushing people who are already good and need to become great, which is the environment that I work in, the particular school I'm in. People who are competent but need to be worked hard and challenged in different ways to get better. And not everybody can do that either. Not everybody can work in a failing public school and try to pull it up, and not everybody in that environment can transition and work in the school that I work in. So, I think that different teachers can, serve a purpose in different environments.
Yeah, there's a lot of, that is one thing about the field of education. There's kind of endless possibilities as far as the type of role that you want to have, and you kind of have to start where you can start, which for me was Teach for America. And then when I came to New Orleans, I actually got a job teaching with First Line Schools because I wanted to work in administration, but I just couldn't sell anybody that I knew what I was doing in that realm. Like, they wouldn't believe me. So I said, well, maybe teaching will be different now that I'm back home. And I started teaching a third grade class and was just really unhappy. And I had a wonderful principal who could see that after a while. And she was like, you don't seem like the person I hired. Like, what is wrong? And I was just like, this is really draining for me. Like, I'm in a great situation. This is a great school. I love the kids in my class. It's just, I'm tired. I can't do this. And she luckily gave me the opportunity to say, it's okay. You don't have to do this. And that was a really meaningful moment for me. Oh, I don't have to do this. There are other options, and I'm still right now trying to really figure out what I want my career to be, and that's okay. I'm trying to be okay with that, and I think I've gotten there.
How did you convince people that you could become an administrator? I'm really
Yeah, I took the lowest rung job I could find. So what I ended up doing is I switched to a different school, and I worked as an administrative assistant to the principal of the middle school. And I basically just did whatever she needed me to do. I took a gigantic pay cut to do that, and from teaching, that is substantial. And so, but I was lucky to have the flexibility to do that. So I was helping the very first day, actually. It's actually a funny story. The very first day, she was like, we promised this class a nacho party like a month ago. They earned it. Can you help me throw a nacho party? And I was like, I don't know what that means, but I will figure out how to make nachos for these children. And that was my first day. And it just kind of went from there. And I learned that I ended up working with, they had this very sophisticated set of like merits and demerits for the middle schoolers. They were called marks for demerits, or you could earn benefit bucks, which are your kind of where your positive money. And so every week, like it was my job to calculate the benefit bucks and print the benefit buck checks for the students, and then help them shop in the benefit bucks store, which I was also in charge of. And so I kind of learned this in a very simple way, like business. And then from there, the next year, I took on a role of data coordinator at the school. So I became the testing coordinator, and I also was in charge of, at our schools, we're very data driven, and so the students take tests at 4 times a year before the big LEAP test, and the teachers reflect on how their students are doing all the time, and so it was my job to kind of present the student achievement data in a way that the teachers could use. Mm-hmm. So I started doing that, and then the next year I became the operations manager. All kinds of stuff happening. And the operations manager means I made sure that the buses showed up, and if they didn't, I knew who to yell at. And I made sure that the food was served on time, and
when things broke.
When things broke, I fixed them, which was hilarious. Like I learned to use a drill and a screwdriver and a hammer, and I learned some IT things I didn't know I would ever learn, but I know quite a bit about networks now. And so it's that kind of learning environment, and then that job ended up being a little too much for me. I was working 6 to 6. The job was kind of poorly designed, frankly. So then I was offered an opportunity to work kind of in the central office to do the same types of things, the operations. And so now I've just revised our purchasing system, which was long overdue. Did
you take business courses?
No.
I mean,
no.
Could we attribute this then to your flexibility that you learned at Scholars College?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I was basically a Spanish major with an English minor, and I don't know. Yeah. But I think it's part of you're just kind of being open to experiences, and I really kind of fell in love with the technical side of things and grew from there. So, yeah. Any other questions?
A number of these students are in the thesis methods course.
Fun.
This semester, spring remember, they're trying to figure out their thesis projects.
Awesome.
Would you mind sharing what your theses were and maybe make some connections? You didn't do science theses. So,
no, I
did
did
not. As familiar.
No.
I don't remember them as well. I think I remember Chris's.
Right.
Yeah, you want to go first?
Sure. So I was an English major with a professional writing concentration, and I wrote a short novel as my thesis, but it was the underpinning of it was sort of theoretical. I took some things that I'd studied in Brothers Karamazov class and things like that. And the idea was to take a 19th century approach to the contemporary novel. It's a difficult thing to look back on now and read. I feel like right, that perhaps the schedule.
There, I'm sure.
Yeah. Go ahead. I feel like the schedule didn't really lend itself to having multiple drafts of it, and that was my fault. So it, it wasn't as good as I would have hoped, and I would encourage you to structure that time better than I did.
Yeah.
But it was a great learning experience, and I've stolen bits of that for other things that I write now. So
You went on to do a master's, and I guess you had a thesis with that.
yes,
So-
yeah, my master's.
How are those comparable?
Not at all. My master's
Not the topic, I mean, just
was.
the work.
Well, that's a good point, right? The work, I think I was able to bring the research background that I had from scholars and apply that in a way that some of my peers didn't at the graduate level. My master's thesis basically dealt with establishing high expectations in a classroom in a very data-driven and explicit way, and models for that. But I feel as if my approach to it was greatly informed by the scholars' research experience and thesis experience, and going into that at the graduate level, some people didn't know what a thesis was, and I had written one. So
Oh, really?
that was just from that aspect of having that comfort and having that experience to draw from. It was really valuable.
Definitely. I chose a novel by a Cuban writer, Reynaldo Arenas' El Mundo Alucinante. And I analyzed it with kind of a Foucault lens. And honestly, I don't remember very much about it. I'm going to be really, really honest. I wrote it, and I spent a lot of time working on it, and I was proud of it when it was finished, but I was also very much just like, okay, I am not going to write papers anymore. Not where I want to go with this. Whereas Chris, took a very different path, so that's okay too. Like, I still consider myself very much like an intellectual, but I don't feel the need to be scholarly on a daily basis, and I think that's okay. I miss it sometimes, like especially when I come back here. I'm like, oh, man, I miss discussing novels or discussing things with a group of people who have also experienced them, but
again, you never know how things are going to show up, because I'm working on a research project right now with my English 4 class, and guess where all that evaluating sources material comes from?
yeah.
It's, stuff I first learned here.
For you,
Yeah.
you said you wrote on a Cuban writer. Were they magic realist at all?
Yes,
Yes.
actually.
And how do you reconcile, like, I'm sure you made use of JSTOR and other critical articles in your research. I'm sure there's a lot of people who apply Foucault. He's one of my favorites.
Right.
So how do you reconcile pulling in other people's research, saying other people's ideas as a synthesis of your own? How do you feel that you are doing something original? That's my question.
Yeah, how do you feel? It's actually that's the hard part. That was really difficult for me, because I was trying to find a new lens, and I think what I did was chose a book that didn't have a lot written about it yet, and that helped me. I then saw how Foucault was applied to other works, and kind of used that to help me to analyze the one I was looking at.
So did you pick specific works of Foucault to apply?
It was.
So which one did you use?
The punishment.
That's
Yeah. What's that? Discipline and Punish. Yes. Because the novel deals with prison and things like that. So it was it's a clear fit.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was, so I focused on that one work of Foucault and the one novel, and I think by kind of narrowing it down, which took several iterations to narrow it down to something coherent, that really, helped me make it and feel like it was my own work as opposed to just kind of cutting and pasting others.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
That's its own skill, though.
It is.
Synthesis. I don't know if we'd criticize a conductor for being able to know a lot about this part and a lot about this part and being able to put it together in a pleasing way. I mean, I think that's its own skill, and that becoming an expert on something is valuable. Just taking part in that discussion, even if you feel like it's a very small part.
Mm-hmm.
If somehow you reverted back to your 18-year-old selves, but you had a lot of the knowledge you have now, what would you do differently when you here at Scholars? Or would you do anything differently?
I would have taken more philosophy, because I didn't actually take any philosophy classes because I was too busy trying to get my credits, like I said. Yeah, I think I would have taken more classes that maybe I was very focused on like finishing in 4 years, and I studied abroad, and that was something I really wanted to do when I was 18. But I wish I had done it for a whole year, that I had actually like gone a little farther, and really like take this time, because it's like, even we don't have kids yet, and we still have a lot of flexibility to. We're getting a puppy soon. Now we get to meet him on the way back tomorrow. Boston Terrier, adorable. Anyways, so we still have a lot of flexibility to kind of do what we want to do, but it does, like, at some point, like, we bought a house, we have to pay bills. I can't, keep changing jobs every day. But in college, you kind of can. So I just suggest this is the time to, like, if you think you might be interested in something, like, check it out. Take the class.
So you don't regret not taking business courses?
I don't. I'm kind of okay with that. Yeah, I really don't.
I think the great thing about the intellectual life is that as one gets older, your vision of the world becomes much broader and more comprehensive. And it's a comfort in a world where very little insight is available to most of us. And I think that that's the great thing about the college. If I were teaching in a regular university in an English department, I think my view of the world would have become narrower progressively. Whereas here, I read science a lot. I read a lot of paleoarchaeology. I'm interested in early human development. I would never have gotten into that without knowing people on the faculty here in science. And then going to Italy on Rick's tours, I spend more time on Latin and on Roman history than anything else. And it has given me a sense of the world that I never had when I was 30. And I feel that this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, is that the intellectual life has not been a disappointment. And I think that's important to tell people, because people are looking for fulfilling lives. And you're not going to make any money, that's for sure. But if there are things that are more important to you than that, if a grasp of what is going on and has gone on in human civilization is important to you, then, and that all sounds very pompous, but it's just true, then this is the place to get it, I think, to begin to get it anyway.
And what you said about you'll never make much money, that's certainly true, but I feel like that's something people automatically jump to with teaching and with education in general.
That's right.
And that it steers some people away. But we live comfortably, we keep our wants low, and that fulfilling life that you're talking about is worth it for us.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's, from a very young age, maybe even teachers do it themselves, they tell kids like, well, I don't get these fat checks, so then you might just have like a stray comment, but I really try to watch that, because I think it's, it steers people away from something that's very valuable to me.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
Chris, what would you do different?
I think I'd be more conscious of my free time. And by that I don't mean never relax or never go out and have fun with your friends or something like that. I mean, that's
a big part of it.
a really important part of the college experience, and you need that with the level of work that you guys do and the rigor of the academics. You need to unwind. But kind of what Andee was saying, that while you have so many possibilities and while you have free time, I would be very conscious of it and how I'm using it. There are probably, I don't play an instrument. I'd love to have a better knowledge of Latin, say. And those are things that I could have done along with more traveling and things like that, while I was in college and while I had some free time.
Yeah.
Study abroad is something I regret not taking part in.
Yeah.
Because I was...
If you can do it.
Yeah.
Because it's
Nobody ever
comes back and
says,
says, "Man, I wish I hadn't gone." Like, and I met some people when I studied abroad who had horrific experiences studying abroad, and they still kept doing it. Like, it was just like it really does. It opens your mind to thinking in different ways, which then makes you experience your everyday differently and get more out of it every day. Just nice.
I don't think anything is more life enhancing, frankly, than for an intelligent person to travel. I don't think travel is that beneficial for dull people. But if you have a mind and you have intellectual curiosity, travel is about the greatest thing next to reading that I can think of. I really think so.
Did you have a question?
What was your motivation or your driving force when things got out of hand or too much?
That did happen. That's a good question.
What do you think?
Basically, I knew even when I didn't believe I could do it, I knew other people believed in me. And so I wanted to prove them right, basically. Like, I didn't want to disappoint. And that's definitely something, like, my confidence grew over time at Scholars. Like, I feel like by my senior year, like, writing my thesis was really difficult for me. I think I went a little crazy. A little crazy. Might have lost a screw. But it like the sense of accomplishment when it was finished, and I did my defense, and like it was great, and it was totally worth it. And so I guess that's my goal. Just, you can do it. You know, it is hard, but you can totally do it.
Unadulterated arrogance.
Yeah.
Just believing that if somebody else had done something, I could do it better, which is a terrible, damaging way to live your life.
Fair. Whatever works, yeah.
Chris, I know you said that you wanted, was it your original goal to be a professional writer?
Yes, sir.
Full time? Are you still working on that, or did you try on that and it didn't quite work, or how?
I still write. Yeah, I love to write, and I think it's something I would do no matter what. And you know, have pursued a lot of things. I've written a screenplay.
Really?
Yeah. I have like 200 half-finished stories. So I'd like to think of it as like 100 complete ones. And a lot of essays and things like that I've placed, but not anywhere of note. But it's something that I find personally fulfilling, no matter how many eyes are on it.
What is your blog about?
Culture criticism, film, and music. Yeah.
Just one thing, one of my favorite stories about Chris, back when senior colloquium was the topic-driven course, I had sworn I would never teach it again. And Chris, and who was it who came with you? Was it?
It might have been Nick Reeves.
Yeah, came and said, would you do a course on cultural criticism? And I said, no, I'm not teaching senior colloquium again, because you're teaching Evaluative Plummet, because everyone hates the course. Well, they said, what if we designed it? So they put a syllabus together. They found the text, they created the course, and I loved that course. I really did.
It worked out well.
Yeah.
And that was my first experience. Was something that I ended up having to do a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think your screenplay will ever become a movie?
No. But hopefully it'll contribute to, you know, me learning from that and you know, continuing to apply the lessons I got from it.
But I mean, he's, you know, like, that's another thing that's happening in New Orleans for anybody who wants to be sold on New Orleans is film. He actually knows several people who are in the film world, either in California or in New Orleans, and it's a burgeoning.
I'm available for bit parts.
Okay.
They take me. Our friend Spencer was in Treme as a waiter. Like,
Wow.
It was pretty funny. We see him in like the background of a lot of things all the time. But so the screenplay writing and the movie criticism, like, it really is getting somewhere. And in today's like world, like your Twitter friends with, I don't know, I'm old.
You're going all over the place.
So
with this.
old. Anyways, but I'm just saying, like, you're friends with people who are professional writers, and they read what you write and like it. So
Well, part of, yeah, at the very least, part of a community
Yeah.
that I can benefit from.
The
Much
both
like
now
I did
Twitter's in
here.
line with some of us.
Yeah.
You know, everyone is getting it.
Pocket
Yeah.
backs.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Many of you attended conferences, and do you have any favorites or outstanding experiences from that?
Academic conferences?
Yes.
I haven't. I mean, on the
Yeah.
professional development side, I go to a lot of
Things about
teaching-centered
education.
things.
Oh,
But,
okay.
no, not as far as literature.
sorry.
Any other questions?
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
coming.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.